Hello, guys. Happy Monday. I realize I'm jumping on like right on time today without having announced a topic. So I'm probably going to sit here alone for a while. I decided to talk about something that comes up a fair amount. I saw it come up in a homeschool group on Facebook recently. There were sort of two parts to the question, and it was should I should I grade my students? If I'm homeschooling my kids, should I give grades? And then the second part was, if the answer is yes, when? And um, my answer to that is, as is my answer to so many questions, it depends. I'm inclined to say, generally speaking, no, for all the way to ninth grade. I would not give grades. I think letter grades, those kinds of numbers and scoring and things like that, um, came into being precisely because of the standardized nature of schooling, where students were being compared against each other. So the school could decide if they were succeeding in their mission, or that the people paying for the school could decide if they were succeeding in their mission. And it really had less to do with whether the student was succeeding in their mission or the parents for that matter. And yet we got so used to it. We got so used to the paradigm that I think a lot of us, a lot of parents started thinking, well, how will I know? And how will my student know if they're doing well? Or what if they don't have a grade to shoot for? Will they have any motivation, et cetera, et cetera? And my answer to that is, if you were homeschooling from the beginning, they don't know any different. So, hi, Michael. Good to see you. They don't know any different. So they've not had grades. So it's really not a big deal. They don't know what they're missing and they don't miss it. So, it's all good. You can work up a system of your own for letting your children know that they need to improve on something, they need to practice something. Or maybe you don't do that at all. Maybe you leave, especially those elementary grades, to continuing the love of learning and just, really reinforcing all the behaviors associated with learning, curiosity and persistence and follow through and all those kinds of things to teach the learning skills. And you don't get too caught up in how well, according to some kind of other measurement, they're doing any of those things. Even with math and grammar, let's say, they're sort of correct and incorrect. And it's so, in a sense, kind of like pass and fail, but you wouldn't necessarily say fail, you would just say try again, right? So the goal is to get to a point of mastery where a specific concept or a specific skill has been mastered. And the way you know is the child can explain it to you, or they can explain it to a younger sibling, or they could write it out in words. If they're verbal enough, they could just tell you. So as an example, there's sort of two components, let's say even in math, to addition. There's the mechanical, I can add numbers together and I know how to do that, either in a linear equation or by stacking blocks and then saying I have this many and now I have this many and it means whatever. And then, of course, you have explaining what is happening, the deeper understanding of what's happening. And that takes a little bit longer. So mastery is going to be in components. So what are you grading exactly? This is one of my qualms with school. They say, well, oh, yeah, look, they got an A in addition or an A in, first grade math or whatever. And maybe all that means is that mechanically they knew how to answer the questions you gave them. They knew the procedure, but they didn't necessarily know how to explain it. Conversely, you have people who spend so much time on the verbal side of let's talk about math and they can't procedurally do anything. That seems to be a trend lately. Well, I'm going to add the number, whatever. And they're placing too much emphasis on one piece and not the other piece. Usually the procedural part's a little easier first, the memorizing, the rote memorization, and then kind of doing problems. And the deeper understanding, the explaining, and the understanding of how it relates in a sense of number sense to other things, that takes longer. 1 second. So grading, what would you be grading, right? You'd really just be asking the child to do things. And then if they're doing it well, you say, that's great. Let's move on to the next thing. All right, tell me, I have a math thing to share. The way my daughter was expected to answer 2 multiplication questions in 5th grade is the usual Common Core crap. Do you want to share it here in the chat? Feel free to type it up. Okay, awesome. I'll keep going. And then when you're done, I'll come back and address it. So this is why I think grading is kind of problematic. I've seen parents do it. They'll give a kid like 100% on their worksheet, even in homeschooling, or A+ or whatever. Now, some kids love that. Some kids who've come out of school and now they're homeschooling, and so they're used to grades and they kind of want the pat on the head, or they know about grades from something else, a TV show, a movie, friends, etc. And they want it. And they want you to do something like that. So I would say then it's really up to you and your child to talk about it. What would be an acceptable grading system? What is their goal in being graded? Why do they want to be graded? And you can work it out. So you can maybe correct some misperception. If they say, well, I want to be graded to know, to know that I'm, smart, or I'm knowing, I'm doing well or whatever, then you can explain to them how the grade isn't what determines that. It's the results, like whether they understand something and so forth. And you can have that conversation. It's actually a valuable conversation about what achievement actually is. So your daughter was expected to multiply 8 times 14. She wrote down 8 14s. Then she combined them 2 at a time and wrote 4 28s, then 2 56, and finally 1 12. Okay, that's a method. That's a method. Okay. 5th grade. Shows pretty good number sense. She did this on her own. Or was this how she was expected to do it? I'm confused. She said she would have done it differently. The teacher would downgrade for not showing her work. Interesting. So, the way we were taught was 14 and then 8 below, and you would, do the thing and carry and all that stuff, right? Carry the 3. That's how I was taught to do it. That's a really fast way to do it. It's really easy. It's a lot faster than the way that you described. I would just have multiplied. And that's the part that is, I agree with you. So by 5th grade, that should have been first go-to, right? Remember what I was explaining a minute ago? They're leading with that. They're leading, well, it's 8 14s and this is what it means and all this kind of stuff. But if you do that and the kid doesn't have a procedural way of doing it and spending all of this time on it, yeah, I think that's a waste of time. I'd rather see them procedurally know how to accomplish the task and get to the goal of what is 8 times 14. And then you can have a conversation later about it if you need to. And again, I'd ask the teacher, and this I would say to homeschooling parents too, is like, what is your purpose in blowing out that it's 8 14s? Now, I have seen that method used for remediation. So, for example, if you have a student that did not get taught the right way early on, when they could memorize and memorize multiplication tables, okay, now that you know that, we're going to practice a lot of these problems where we do the carry the 3 thing, okay? Until procedurally you can just do it. It's just second nature. You're almost like a human calculator, okay? If that got missed, which happens probably at this point 85-90% of the time, or they just didn't bother to do it. They didn't bother to get them to memorize the multiplication tables. And now you're dealing with a situation where the kid doesn't have Michael as a dad and didn't learn it at home and did, whatever. And you got a brain that's 10 years old and it's a little more calcified. Like, it's not going to be as easy to send them home with their multiplication table and say, go home and memorize this. That's what they should do, but they don't. So this ends up being a kind of remedial method where it takes you twice as much time. But for the kids who kind of like didn't memorize and don't get it, it gives them a way that they can get to the right answer, reliably this way. It's super slow and cumbersome. Exactly. Rather than creating separate classes or tracks, the fast and the slow, they advocate the fast kids should go deeper. Go deeper is code for we all have to go at the pace of the slowest kids who are really remedial students and that need pictures and they need to blow it out into multiple problems in order to arrive at the correct answer. But we're going to call it going deeper. and we're going to call it all these things. I would have just been, like if I were doing an assessment, I'd be at the end of, let's say, third grade, and I would do multiplication test. You're just like, all right, let's do it. Let's go. Let's do the threes. Let's do the fours. Let's do it. And we'd be like chanting and singing, whatever. And when they got through it, then if there were kids who were still like, I don't get it or whatever, I might have some of the quicker kids say, can you explain what's happening when we multiply these two numbers? And then a kid like Michael's daughter might say, well, what you're doing is you have 8 14s. So if I had 14 cookies 8 times, now I have 8 times 14. And then maybe the kid goes, oh, like they conceptually start to get it because somebody else explained it to them, or maybe they played it out. But it would be remediation for the kid who like totally has no idea what's going on, and for whatever reason needs to know what's going on because they're way past the developmental stage of, I don't need to know what's going on. I just need to memorize it. I don't care. I just want to know. I just want to know what 8 times 14 is. How do I figure that out as quick as possible? That's a lot easier thing to do with a younger child. And this is what school passes up. They pass up this opportunity, this golden opportunity of like, I don't know, 4 to 8 years old or so, sometimes all the way to 10, but not often, unless the kid has some kind of learning disability or whatever, they're just playing slower. Usually within that window, the kids just want to know stuff. They just want to memorize things, lots and lots of things. And they want to be good at things, and they want to achieve, and they want to show their answers like the answer, not how I got there. But I will tell you, for what it's worth, my daughter is now 14, was not taught math correctly because she was in public school from kindergarten on, had to, when she switched to homeschooling in 6th grade, had to go back and like relearn her multiplication tables, and it was an arduous process, really hard for her. Like she struggled because she's trying to learn it at the same time that she's trying to apply math at a higher level. It was just a struggle. Never was taught fractions properly, never taught, and because she wasn't taught fractions properly, because you kind of need to understand multiplication, decimals were a mystery, percentage, forget about it. So now we're in high school math, freshman high school math. And even though she got A's through the rest of middle school, she was getting A's in math because thankfully she had a teacher who was able to like focus her on the procedural stuff and just say, all right, this is how we do the procedure. And so she got really good at, even though she didn't really understand how everything worked together, she got good at just kind of memorizing how to do those procedures. Now she's got a teacher in 9th grade who wants them to, as part of every answer, and I'm really frustrated with this teacher because it feels very Common Core-ish, they have to explain how they got their answer. Every single one. And she doesn't know. She has no idea. She can't explain it. So she showed me some of her work and she got the correct answer. I'm like, well, why did you choose to do it this way? Because this is how I was taught to do this kind of problem. When the problem looks like this, this is what I do. And I remember, I memorized this and I memorized that. And so that's how I get here. If I do these things and I do this procedure, I get this answer. And I said, yes, but now you have to explain like what each part of the problem, which she's doing this like baby algebra. It's like algebra. And now she has to explain what the relationships of the numbers are and why this is the answer to that. No idea. Doesn't even know where to start. And so there is some benefit, and I think it just comes organically. It's like if you started early and you did the procedure and then you talked about it and you showed it and you did both. Like Singapore math, what I love about Singapore math is it does both. It gives you lots of procedural work to do while showing you in picture form what that represents when you're little, like 1st grade. So you get both pieces of feedback. This is how I do it quick, and this is what it looks like in real world. Like these are apples, and these are this, and this or that. It's not strictly the apples, and it's not strictly the linear equation. So by the time you get to 14, and you ease off of that, you get away from the picture. So by 5th grade, you don't have that anymore. It's usually like more like by halfway through 3rd grade, the pictures get fewer and fewer and far between. And by the time 5th grade, you're moving into the very few pictures, and you're ready. But here she is 14 and she's like, I missed all of the picture stuff and I missed the rote stuff too, and she's starting from scratch. So, it's a mixed bag, but I don't like grading because they're going to be kids who are really good at one and not so good at the other. And they don't have to be equally good at both. They do have to have, ability to think about it both ways, but most kids are going to end up being better at one than the other. And so what grade are you giving them? A minus? B plus? 95%? Like, why? Why? This is them. This is how they learn. So then good news, you can tailor the rest of their learning to like, I got a rote learner here. Let's go. If I were literally homeschooling her like the real way and didn't have to have her in this stupid program because of who, I wouldn't be doing it this way. I'd be saying, right, this is where we are. You're not going to a STEM field. You're not really interested in having a mathematical career. You may need to do some basic accounting. So let's focus on the arithmetic and let's get the fractions down, because if you have to do accounting, you need to know decimals and you need to know percentages and you need to know the stuff. So let's go back and remediate and get this stuff that you missed out on, the stuff you're going to need to know, and let's leave the rest of it. You're not going to need that. That's what I would do. And why would I give her a poor grade? Why would I, first of all, force her to go through algebra? And then why would I give her a C? Like, to what end? So if you're homeschooling, you have the benefit of being able, especially by the time you get to high school, to get to know your kid and what their plans are, what their thoughts are. You want to go to college, and if so, what do you think you're going to major in, et cetera? Do you not? What math skills do you need? What reading skills do you need? What writing skills do you need? I hate to sound so materialistic or pragmatic, but you're going to have a happier kid and a happier life if you focus in on that, especially by the time they get older, when it does become a little bit more of a credentialing process. And especially then, I still don't see the point of grades. Now, people say, what if they definitely want to go to college? Then what do I do? And again, this doesn't apply. If the kid's like, I love grades, give me grades, and figure out a system. Like I said at the beginning, figure out a system that works for both of you. Remove the arbitrariness of it. Try to have it be meaningful. Explain to the child why you want it to be meaningful and come up with your own system. Consider a portfolio system. Consider things that are more like real world evaluations and explain why. And you can do that. As you get into high school, you might be up against the whole colleges are going to want to see a transcript with some form of grading. That is true. I still think you work it out with your student. Now, if they're attending classes at community college, you have no choice. They're going to be graded. If they're going to a class that's graded by a teacher, like online, you have no choice. The teacher's going to grade, and they do that for the same reason the school grades, because how they are rated by the outside world as teachers, as a business, is going to be determined by how well their students are doing on paper, on grades. You can't evaluate how Susie, someone else's daughter, did well subjectively. You need to look at like, how well are your students doing? Well, we got this many in the A range and this many in the B range, or this many got into college. That's how people evaluate things. So once you get to that point, you're going to have to deal with it. But if you're doing all the teaching and you're doing the evaluating, it is still up to you. It is not cheating. You are not a liar. If you come up with a grading system, even for your high school student, that would net them in almost every case something close to an A or a pass or whatever, that you then pass off to the colleges. Because if you are being honest and you know that what you're grading the student on is whether they actually know the material that was taught and they can do something with it, you have the beauty of letting it take as long as it takes to get to that grade. So it's not they got an A and they were on this 180-day timeline, had to get it done in that amount of time. No. If you have to go over the same lesson 10 times until they can get 100%, or if you have to go over the same writing assignment 20 more times and they're in that basic English class for 2 years until they can write a proper essay and then they get an A in that class because you took that time, and then the next one's a lot easier because you took that time, and so that one only takes 6 months and they get an A in that, you're not cheating. You're giving grades that actually grade what the student can do, and the college doesn't care. That's what they want. Your grades are more reliable than the ones they get at public school that are like, shit, half my class is failing according to these arbitrary measurements, so I'm going to grade on a big fat curve. You all get A's. Now the college is looking and go, I don't know what the hell this means. This could be an A. This could be a C. They have no idea. They don't know with you either, except you have the ability with your transcript to put in reading lists, to put in very clear course descriptions. You even get to describe your grading system. This is a benefit you have. So you can say, A's in my homeschool were dependent on mastery. Mastery meant the student didn't move on until they could work to this rubric. My rubric, you can even give the college, this was my rubric for essay writing. This was my rubric for math. This was my rubric for science. And you don't have to make these up from whole cloth, by the way. These exist on the internet. You can go find them. You can copy from other people's examples. There are some fantastic rubrics out there that you could use. And you can say, this is what we used. So you can rest assured that my student got an A because they did this. And they did it within this span of time. They're going to see it too. Like, you know, they took this class from this date to this date. Go ahead and put the dates. Show them how long it took. And you might say, oh, I don't want to show the college that it took 1.5 years for them to master, you know, whatever, beginning literature or something. Why? If they mastered it, they're still ahead of the kids who didn't master it and rushed on through. So Michael says, could you have students take something like the NWEA MAP test and have the grade be based on their performance on that for core subjects? You could, but I would recommend CLEP tests. So if we're talking about high school students now, and you're looking for college entrance, I think you will do better to have your students take CLEP tests in the subject matter areas, and that shows a level of mastery. You MAP tests, I think, for the younger grades. Yeah, so if you're talking about, okay, I want my child to go to like private middle school, for example, and you've been homeschooling them for K through 5, and you're saying like, all right, we've been homeschooling, they're really well prepared. I found an excellent private, you know, like classical school or what have you, and they want to see some grades. You're supposed to, in most states, have some kind of standardized test at the end of the year regardless. I know even in North Carolina, we're supposed to have one. No one is coming and asking for it, but I used to have them take one anyway, and I kept it on file. It helped me know what they were doing. I did Woodcock Johnson for one of my kids, and I did another, starts with an S, but I can't remember what it was called, for my elder daughter. And those gave me a great window into what they were doing well, what they needed to work on. And they were above the so-called grade levels on every single thing. So I felt a lot less bad about not grading, because I'm like, how do I grade my second grader? Or how do I evaluate this, you know, on a grade basis? I just see that she's doing work that I would, from being an elementary school teacher, I would say that's way above elementary level, but I don't know. You know, maybe I'm just the mom and I'm, you know, patting myself on the back. The standardized tests do help. So yes, you could do those. And I do favor CLEP over AP. Yes, if they're motivated to do the AP, it's a fine alternative. Just bear in mind that you should compare and contrast it with dual enrollment. And I say that because increasingly the AP curriculum, the material they're teaching in the AP classes, or even that you could go teach to the test, because you'd still have to teach to the test if you want them to pass the test. They've wokeified the material. Now, if it's math or science, I can't speak to that, but I know for like English and history, it has been made very woke, and yet it's still super challenging. In other words, they expect you to cover a massive amount of material in a short amount of time. And the tests that I've seen, the practice tests and so forth, seem almost designed to get you to fail. It's super weird. It's almost like they have a deal with the colleges that says, we're going to make it really hard for these kids to place out of your core classes, so they have to pay you. And I know that's very conspiratorial of me to say that, but given everything we've seen in the last couple of years, I wouldn't put it past the College Board, because the College Board is a for-profit enterprise. They are very woke, like extremely woke. The head of the College Board, all that, is like known for being woke. So the AP has changed. It's not super high quality material anymore. It's just a lot more of it. Your kid's going to work really hard, study their ass off. You're going to pay money like for the test. And if they don't get the score, I think it's a 4 or a 5, depending on the college you're applying to, they won't get the college credit. So you went through all that trouble only to have to retake the class in college and pay for it again effectively. And that's really deflating. People say, oh, but it's more prestigious. Yeah. What was your goal? To be able to say to people, my kid is taking AP classes, or to get college credit for the work. So basically, I still recommend dual enrollment, even for STEM, because you are taking a college level class. So the work is going to be college level work. You say, well, it's a community college. I'm like, for your high school student, it's plenty good enough. Okay. And you're going to get high school credit and you're going to get college credit. And you just have to pass. Now, obviously, if you get an A, so much better. That's awesome. You get an A, now you're taking sophomore classes, your freshman year of college, you're in a STEM field, but people aren't necessarily going to go back and look at exactly what your score was, because remember, it was taken in high school. It goes on your college transcript, but it will affect your GPA. So you don't want to do poorly, but people still look at it as, oh, high school student did college work. So don't discount how prestigious it looks that your junior or senior in high school was taking a college STEM class for credit. To me, that looks just as good, if not better. It also shows excellent planning and foresight. Okay. Because now somebody looks at this and says, this is a person who is dead serious at the age of 16 about going into a STEM field. They committed fully. So, yes, AP courses, when you were going to school, when I was going to school, it was all about the content. It was fundamentally different content. It wasn't just college level content. It was deeper. It was broader. I took US history AP and literature AP, passed both tests. No, I got 5 on both, went to college, straight into sophomore classes. Best thing I ever did. It was also the only option I had. I was in prep school, so we didn't have dual enrollment. We didn't have that option. It was like you go to prep school, and if you're remotely capable of AP, your teachers also, this was a difference when you and I were young, Michael. I don't know about you, but we had to be nominated for AP by our prior year's instructor. You couldn't just sign up to take AP. You had to be recommended. It wasn't even based just on the grade, because it was a combination of you did well in your grades and your temperament and your discipline and all those kinds of things, because it was so much more work. It was so much more intense and took so much more of your time that they relied heavily on the instructors to say, is this person ready for AP level work? So every person in my AP class was recommended to be there. And nowadays, with equity and all this other stuff, they are trying to be all fair and schmear and all this and be like, we got to have equal amounts of everybody in the AP class. AP is about prestige as much as it is actually passing the test. And, oh, my kid's in AP classes. And you don't go back and check back with them. Did they pass? Did they actually pass the test? I was tutoring a girl on AP chemistry. No, I'm sorry, AP biology. Back in 2016, thereabouts. And first of all, I could not for the life of me understand why she was in the class. She had no business being in AP bio. I think she was in AP bio because she'd had sort of like pretty good grades, like high B's in all her other classes. And, her parents were like, sign up for AP bio. And, that's like how they thought of her, as like, well, this is a very good student. She should be in AP. And she's in AP bio and she was absolutely floundering, had no business being in there. And on top of that, the teacher was saddled with all kinds of people who had no business being in AP bio. Probably half the class had no business being there. So the instructor had to go more slowly. And when they got to, I remember her telling me it was something like in late March, the instructor said, we're not going to finish the course in time for the test. I urge you all to go take a prep class because we're simply not going to finish in time. She had to go at that slow a pace. So many questions, so many people failing quizzes, exams, things that they were supposed to be doing that they just couldn't pass. So she had to go back, go over it again. Now, she could have been a crappy teacher. I don't know, but I have a sneaking suspicion it was the quality of the students in the class, because the student that I was tutoring I wasn't doing the AP bio. I was just, her mom asked me while I was tutoring her other stuff, what do we do about this? I said, you have to sign her up for a prep class. So I found her a prep class, got her signed up, and she totally failed. She did not get that college credit. So all that stress, all that time, all that money on a prep class, et cetera and so forth, for nothing. Meanwhile, my daughter did dual enrollment chemistry. Now, in fairness, she failed it the first time, but it wasn't her fault. Everybody in the class failed. You know why? Because the state, in its infinite wisdom in the middle of COVID, got all spastic and accidentally had all these kids in the class for which there was a prerequisite without having had them take the prerequisite. So every single student in the class was like, do you guys know what's going on? I have no idea what's going on. What's happening? Is it? Nobody knew what was going on. The instructor sucked on top of that. Like there were complaints filed. This was a big to-do in North Carolina. And they found out when they got back the scores, like everyone failed. That's when somebody caught it and said, oh my God, this was the wrong class. None of these people should have been in this class. Of course they couldn't do it. So they gave them the class. I mean, it sucked because you can't get that time back, can you? You can't get a whole semester of your life back. But they let them take the class again for free. They gave them the correct class. This time she got a B+. So she got the credit with a B+ on her transcript. And she's now she's got college science credit out of the way. She only has to take one more science course her whole college career to take their distribution requirements. And she passed the English dual enrollment with flying colors. I mean, got an A in that class in freshman English and also got a whole year's worth of high school English for her trouble in one semester. She took a year, so she got 2 years. She took 1 year, she got 2 years of English and placed out of freshman English. So she said, I've just saved myself thousands of dollars. And when I went up to visit her, she's like, thank you, Mama. Like, thank you. She said, I kind of thought it was a good idea, but whatever. I was just happy to get out of the house, et cetera and so forth. Like she was like half paying attention to me going, this is what you need to do. And now that she's there, and now that she's in college and paying for it herself, with her own hard-earned money, she's just like, oh my God, you've saved me thousands of dollars. Thank you for pushing me. Thank you for getting me to do this instead of AP, instead of that. And I was like, you're welcome. Sometimes Mama knows a thing or two. So I really leave it up to the family. There are pros and cons. But I am right now leaning towards dual enrollment versus AP for that reason, because you just get more bang for your buck as a student and as a family for doing it. The costs associated, the credit you're gonna get. Nobody's going to take it away from you. So, and it's free. You pay lab fees, but for 2 classes for the whole year, including the chem lab fees, which thankfully again she got twice, it was like $300. And that included a parking pass that she never needed to use because she wasn't driving. I was taking her there. So, that's my 2 cents on that. But as far as the grading goes, that kind of does feed into the grading conversation, which is, if you have grading conversations with your student as a homeschool parent, and you explain what grades are in college and in other courses they might take and why they're there, that they're not necessarily a measure of like their specific achievement, it's their achievement compared to other people and compared to a bunch of other variables. And you come up with your own system just to get them used to being evaluated. The most important thing is, do they know the material? Because then you're not throwing them into the deep end whether they first get grades in college or junior college or whatever they're going to, or not. They understand what the evaluation is. It's not a big shock to their system. And let's face it, your grades in college matter more if you're going to grad school than they do in general. So, grades in high school are to get you into college. You get to do the transcript, and as I've already explained to you, you can set up your own system. You can decide your child's going to get A's, or go ahead if you want to be, you'll let them pass a class with a B or whatever. That's between you and your child. I actually know homeschool parents who have worked it out where the kid says, I want a life and I need to work and save money, or I have this sport or this hobby that I love to do. So no, I really don't want to continue drilling away at the course or doing whatever until I get A work, until I've done what you feel comfortable, Mom, putting A, or Dad, A on a transcript so that I really truly know it at an A level. I'm fine with the B. That's not even my core area because I want to be done. So if you can tell this, if I've done work to the level of a B, and that's cool with you, then I'm moving on with life. I want to move on and let's keep going because I'll take it. But that's a negotiation you guys can have too. They're getting closer to adulthood. They're getting closer to applying to college. That's really the bargain they've made with themselves in high school anyway, isn't it? They just have more control this time. They're getting given a choice. In high school, they're not given a choice to like make up the test or do it again or spend another 3 months on the course till they can master it and get an A or get from a C to a B. You can give them that opportunity. You can also give them an opportunity not to do it, which puts them no farther behind than they would have been in public school. And they're probably still farther ahead because your content's better. So you see what I'm saying? Like grading then serves a purpose of negotiating what the rules of credentialing are in your household and with your student and what they want to get out of it. As long as you explain to them that if they have as a goal to go to college and they're going to look at these grades and that this level of college looks at this and this level of college looks at this and you know, have a frank conversation with them. And I would say, go ahead and have that conversation like the end of sophomore year. You don't need to do it freshman. Just work up some rudimentary grading system where you guys can work it out and figure out what they're going to do as freshmen and start getting the high school ball rolling with this level of work. But don't start talking about college yet. What I've noticed about freshmen in high school is they feel like there's a big difference between middle school and high school because there is, and they are still a little bit of middle school mindset and they're still getting used to it. And you start talking about college and they go, they like get pressured. Obviously there are exceptions. You've got those kids who've known they want to go to MIT from the time they were 6. Okay, whatever. But I'm talking about the norm. And the norm these days is a kid who's like, I don't even know if I want to go to college. It's not really until the end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year, that they start to like settle in on, yeah, I think I want to go, or I don't know, I want to see what my other options are. But before that, it's just premature. They're just like, I just got to high school. What? And if I go by just what my youngest tells me, and she's a very diligent student, she's very self-motivated. She's the kind of kid who says, I'm not 3 assignments ahead, I'm behind, you know, like my homework is due on Friday, I need it done by Thursday. Like that's just her personality. So I've asked her about these kinds of things, and she has said, she's like, I'm just getting used to high school. She said, people say that 8th grade's really, really hard and that 9th grade's not that much harder than 8th grade. She said, they lie. They're liars. Now, again, if she were really homeschooling, you know, maybe that would be true. Maybe that wouldn't be true. But I tend to think it would be true. It would still be true. Because when my daughter left freshman year at public school to be pure homeschooled in sophomore year, and I was picking everything, I was her teacher and I was doing everything, the kid was like, I'm sorry, what? Wait, what? And I'm like, you just had a year of high school. It's like, nuh-uh. This is high school. She's like, I didn't do high school. I did continuation of middle school. I don't know what that was, but that this is no. And I looked at her work and she wasn't wrong. And yet there are kids who go to that and think that's harder than middle school. She told me about them. She said, there are kids in my class. They're floundering. They're like, what? What's going on? Because they were coasting through middle school and now they're like making them read longer books and write paper. And I'm like, yeah, but you still only had to write like 2 papers in a year. I'm making you write like 4, you know? So I was doing real high school, like what high school was when I was a kid, and not even copying school. I was doing what I knew she was capable. Yes, a whole book. And I was just doing what I knew she was capable of. And to her, that was hard because she was used to coasting. So a lot of this is going to depend on where is your kid and how much time were they in public school versus homeschool. The people start young. The younger you start with homeschooling your kid, this all becomes an academic exercise. This becomes a non-conversation, you know, because they just ramp up and catch up so much quicker, especially when you start them young. So if they were in, let's say they were in public school through 5th grade, and you pull them out and you do middle school at home, and then you're going to make up so much in those 3 years that will make your head spin. You're going to make up in 6th grade probably 3 years worth of crap they didn't get properly in elementary. That's how much you can accomplish at home because you're not dealing with all the extraneous bullshit that they deal with in the public school or in any school, even a private school. There's not hurry up and wait. You don't need 8 hours a day. You're not going to have, advisory and SEL and sex ed and blah, blah, and gym class and all this other crap. You can focus on the things they're really passionate about, they're really interested in. You can go deeper into a subject. You can go down a rabbit hole in English class and read all of a specific author. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but guess what's also getting developed? Their reading comprehension, their vocabulary, their writing skills without them even noticing. And they wake up at the end of 6th grade, as my youngest daughter did. And this was even doing like an online private school. And she was like, I didn't know school could be fun. And I didn't know I could write this well. And I didn't know that I was actually pretty good at grammar. Because in 1 year, there weren't all these other classes. She goes to class probably 2 hours a day, maybe. I think one day she has 3 hours of class. And the rest of the time is up to her to do her work. Like do the reading, do the studying, do the outlining, do the note cards, take a nap, go for a walk, do some art, like whatever else. But it's kind of on her to get it done. So she's, they're teaching, but it's not like you're stuck in a building 8 hours a day and waiting for a bunch of other people to, ask questions. She even now complains, something she never complained about before in public school, where I knew, because I was a volunteer there, I knew that there were so many times I'd drop in on her class and she'd be like this, waiting for the 17 questions of the people who weren't listening, so they missed the directions for the assignment, or waiting for the teacher to explain it the 15th way. And she's like, we've been over this. We've just spent a week doing this. I'm so bored, right? Now, once she was in the private thing where they don't have that kind of time to do that. It's like an hour class, boom, we're done. And you have the class twice a week and that's it, the kids have access to the teacher. So they'll say like, either put your question in the chat. If I don't have time to get to it, you send my email, my office hours or X. It's much more like private school and more like college. So the kids get direct one-on-one help when they need it. And the rest of the kids don't have to sit there while they get it. And so now even in high school, she's like, oh, I can't believe these people ask so many questions. I'm like, it was still only a 1 hour class. I know, but there were like 5 questions. The answer, I'm like, you're so spoiled. Like, remember in public school where it was like the whole session was questions of people who didn't do the homework, weren't paying attention, and they weren't even so much asking questions. It was like the teacher dealing with the kids who didn't do the homework. I didn't understand. Oh, I didn't do it. Why didn't you turn in your homework? I don't know. Forgot. I said, what? I lost it. Then kids talking out of turn, rustling around in their desks, having a fight, blah, 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 blah. And so the smart kid is sitting there like, there's an hour of my life I will never get back. And so here she is, where that doesn't happen. Not even close to that. They won't tolerate that. But, 5 questions that pisses her off. She's just like, And I've asked her when she says, I didn't really understand this whole concept, and it's usually math. I said, well, did you put it in the chat? She goes, I'm not going to slow everybody down. That would piss me off. No, I wrote an email. I'm like, good girl, So I don't mind. I mean, she's learning good habits. She's even learning, in my personal opinion, to be fairly respectful of everybody else's time, that she's there for her and they're there for them. And, it's a completely different model. And so she writes an email to the teacher and says, I'm still kind of lost. She also has learned how to go to her peers privately. Like, she has a friend who's really good at her math class. And she goes to this girl and they have little conversations off to the side separately over Zoom or over FaceTime or whatever. And she's like, you seem to get this. Can you help me? And of course the girl's like, absolutely, no problem. And they help each other, but it's private. Like, they don't have to be in the middle of class. They're like, I don't get it. Can you help me? She knows who her friends are and she goes to them. And that's something else homeschool kids can do. If you have your kid in a co-op, you have your kid in a sort of private class, or you found a parent who teaches math or whatever. And guess what? What does this also sound like? Real life. That's what real life is like. Real life isn't like we're all crammed in a room together to learn a new skill. And when we don't understand it, we got to raise our hand. I mean, with professional development trainings, maybe it's like that. But every new thing you have to learn in life is not done in public. Your every little oopsie is not on display for other people. And you don't have to sit and wait for other people's oopsies to be done so you can move on to the next topic. So just another benefit of homeschooling. But it does make grading a completely different exercise. Because right now in the schools, what they're looking at is like, do we grade for participation or is that discriminatory? In some cases, it might be helpful to the kids who are not doing so well because they raise their hand a lot and they're participating. In other cases, we grade on participation, the shy kid gets screwed. The kid who understands it, like instinctively, or they were there a year ago, they don't have anything to contribute. They're bored and they're not contributing, and now you're grading them negatively because they didn't participate. Half the time now, great participation grade is, did you help other people? It's all about your EQ. So they're grading for goofy ass reasons. And depending on the age of your child and when you pull them out, you can explain that too. If they say, well, in school, they give us grades and this and that, because again, it's amazing to me how many kids are still attached to that when they come out of school. They're like, well, who's going to grade me? How am I going to know how I'm going to? So you sort of, it's like a little class unto itself to explain to your child that grading serves a different purpose when you do it in homeschooling, if any, that it's their purpose, not the school's purpose. It's not even your purpose. The only reason it's for you is to help them. Everything becomes individual centric. Like I said, even that transcript for college becomes about them and what they want to get out of it. Because as the parent, you're not a guidance counselor or college counselor who's getting compensated or rewarded on how many kids you get into college. You just have to get the one, yours. And you're more motivated by, is it the right college? You're more motivated by, do they really belong there? And can they afford it? Is there a value proposition going on here? So your incentives are completely different. And so will your grading system be. Because there's no benefit to you to just go, sure, it's an A. And then they have their heart set on going to MIT. And if you have any sense in your brain, they aren't going to get in. Because they won't do well on the SAT or the ACT, and the A you gave them, even if, let's say, you could flub it and lie on everything, that let's say they magically did really well on the ACT or SAT or CLEP test or whatever, even though your grades were totally made up. So they haven't really done the work. They're just sort of like really good test takers. I mean, obviously I doubt that would be possible, but let's just say they would flunk. They'd flunk out because they wouldn't have the discipline to handle the rigor of that environment. And that's a very far-fetched example. Let's just take a more likely example of a place like App State, like where my daughter goes. She has even commented to me that there are students who've gotten in there in her class already, who she's like making predictions. They have like a little pool going in her group of friends of who in their classes will drop out first. Pretty sad, right? I mean, I told her, I said, that's kind of not a very good use of your time. You think that's kind of mean? What? And she's like, I can't really help it. It's impossible not to notice. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, they all got in, right? They're here, same as me. It's, it's fairly competitive. It's not super competitive, but it's competitive enough. And she said, and they got in and they just are not ready to do this level of work. She's like, I'm kind of wondering how they got the grades they got to get in here. I'm kind of wondering what happened on there, because now they're waiving tests a lot of times. They're waiving the standardized tests, and I don't know if App State did, but I don't think they waived it, but I think they lowered the standards of what score you had to have because of COVID. And then of course we all know the grades are inflated. And she said she can pick out like a dozen people, like in every class that she's in already, who are just like staring blankly at the professor, like, what? Totally unprepared. So what good were their A's? They got them in, but so what? So those were teachers who didn't give a shit what happened next. That was a college counselor who looked at the inflated grades and said, I can get you in here, and really didn't give a shit what happened next. But this is your kid, so you do care. So if your kid is doing C work and you cared enough about them to homeschool them in the first place, you're probably going to give them a C. Or if you're not using grades, or you're not, whatever grade system you came up with, you're probably going to say, I can't really pass you out of this material. We can't move on because you have a goal of going to college. So something's got to give. Either you're going to have to work harder or do better, or take the subject a different way, learn the subject a different way, or set your sights on a less competitive college. You have options. These are options. Again, real world choices you have to make. Things don't always work out minute rice perfect. So I'm not going to tell you you have to get an A in this class. If you are miserable, if you are like, I hate this subject matter, mom. I think a C is the best I can do because I'm just like hanging on by my fingernails. I don't even want to do the readings anymore. And no, there's no other way I can learn it because I just freaking hate it. You might have to say to them, okay, I'll put a C down and you can be done, but you haven't done better than this rubric's level of work with your demonstrated knowledge and whatever, because I'd be doing you a disservice if I said it was an A when it's not. And it's not a judgment on you. You're not like a bad person. You're not a failure. You're just not all that great at this subject. And not everybody's great at everything. C for you in this subject is best you could do. That's fine. Let's go work on this other stuff. And you get to do that. They'll never hear that in school. And as I said, that's more useful real world information than they would otherwise get. Real world is going to do that to them. It won't be called a C or an A or a B. It'll be called a satisfactory evaluation for their job or whatever. It'll be called, you didn't get the promotion, the other person did. It'll be called, we're letting you go, or you know what, we chose to hire a different person. It's going to look like a lot of different things, but it's effectively the same thing. They're going to be compared to other people in the rest of their life, whatever they do. I mean, even if they're an entrepreneur, they may not get the client, they may not get the work, they may not get a good rating, whatever it's going to be. And so at some point, explaining rating systems to them, grading system to them is important, but the one you come up with should be tailored to them. And I really don't recommend doing it with any degree of seriousness before high school, unless the kid explicitly asks. Like if they say like, I want this, I want grades. I'm used to grades. It helps me. I like to know how I'm doing compared to like a thing. And I want it to be a number, or I want it to be a letter, and it's going to motivate me. And this is my carrot. And this is what I do. Knock yourself out. There's, like I said, the internet is full of homeschool grading systems, rubrics, all that. You can Google them. There are plenty of homeschool bloggers, homeschool YouTubers that publish how they do it. You can compare, contrast. I've known people that use different systems for every child. They have 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever, totally different system per kid. No reason you can't do that. So it's an important topic, but to me, it's an important topic that further reflects the benefits associated with homeschooling. Is that you control this, and not the way the average person on the street thinks of like mom grades. Oh, you were homeschooled. I bet your A was just like mom grades. People don't understand that homeschool moms are tough. Homeschool dads are tough, right? We do this because we want the best for our kids. We do this because we think highly of our children. Not like, oh, they're such little angels and perfect. No. What I've noticed is the parents who are like that about their kids, and which dehumanizes them, I think. They're like fashion accessories, status symbols. Like, my child could do no wrong, is not a person who really places that child on a pedestal. That's about putting themselves on the pedestal through their child, right? They're living vicariously. This is my bumper sticker, is this kid. They're not a person. And so those people are the ones most likely to sign them up for a National Association of Independent Schools school and put up with all manner of abuse because they're getting the decal, they're getting the crest on the sweatshirt and all the things. And even, when they get A's, they don't care if they mean anything as long as it's an A. Like, that's them. Homeschool parents tend to have more realistic views of their own kids' abilities and limitations, and they think highly enough of their children. I've noticed this is a trend as individuals to be tough on them. Not crazy tough, but appropriate tough for that person. So the whole notion of mom grades, I think, is projection from the people who know good and damn well that if they were homeschooling, because of how they view their kids, they wouldn't be able to resist. They would not be okay with watching their own child struggle. They would not be okay with giving them anything less than an A because they would take it personally on them. And that person probably shouldn't homeschool. Just saying. I mean, I wish everyone would, but that's probably not going to work out so well. It's sort of sad. And I have noticed in the last 2 years, there are way more of those parents out there than I thought there were, which is extra sad. Anyway, getting down to less than 5 minutes. Let me just quickly go over this. Yeah, so you've seen how the tests have changed because of that guy. You mentioned his name up here, David Coleman. Yeah, not a good guy. And then you mentioned how they're massively downplaying quantitative ability in all the science tests. 100%. They're massively downplaying quantitative ability, and yeah, he's head of that. And procedural knowledge across the board. No grammar either. They've got grammar, Grammarly and grammar check and spell check and all this kind of stuff. So anything procedural, anything mechanical, anything technical in the, in most fields, certainly in the social sciences and certainly in the humanities, it's now moving into STEM. It has been slower to get there, that they've devalued those things, but it's getting there with a rapid clip now. It's like they've put the pedal to the floor, which is kind of scary. All right, we have one more comment. I see Michael is typing, and then I'll finish up. Don't get me going. Another trend is that all subject courses are assuming that any quantitative aspects of their subject belong in math class. Oh my God. Yes. The same is happening, by the way, for writing and expression, communication. That's an English class. Now. So used to go to like history class and all these things. And if a kid was struggling, like you said, in reading, or they were struggling with writing, or their grammar was shit, they would take care of it right then and there. Like the teacher was capable of marking your grammar mistakes in your history paper. They were capable of saying, you need to go back and read more closely in your psychology class, whatever. No, it's just all English class. They don't even do it. They're not even asking them to write anymore in these other classes. This is where we do history. This is where we do something. Just fill in the blanks, blah, blah, blah. Answer the multiple choice. All the writing, all the grammar, all the everything. That's for English class. Putting a lot on those English teachers. So yeah, I totally agree. Well, I hope this has been helpful, both in terms of the grading question about homeschooling, but also just in terms of some of these other things, like to AP, to not AP, to dual enrollment, what's happening, etc. I would love to talk to you more, Michael, about this whole issue of the math thing. Maybe we can do like a joint recording or show together about it, because I'd like to pick your brain and know more about it to present to my audience. Getting a lot more questions about math lately too. So thanks everybody for coming, and I will see you on Friday. Please put a topic in the suggestions for Friday. Thanks, and have a great rest of your week.